And to give folks a chance to move through their, Zoom, WebEx, Google hallways and get onto this meet, we'll just start a couple minutes after 3. I'm going to go ahead and switch slides here. Hoping that as you join us, you might just add your name, treatment program or school affiliation, and your email address to the chat. And if you'd like to keep your email private, please feel free to send that directly to me. I'm just going to use it to make sure that everyone gets the CEU quiz after today's event. So that's the purpose. And welcome. Thanks so much for being here. Welcome, Michelle. Welcome, Mark. Thanks for being here. Okay. So we are recording, just a reminder, welcome. You are at the first event for the Justice Provider Strengths series. I'm with the Utah Criminal Justice Center. Throughout the hour, please feel free to use the chat, audio or video. The hope really is that that this feels like a peer-to-peer event and that it allows for some level of dynamic conversation. I understand we all have different sort of things happening in our own separate backgrounds, but so glad that you're here and please participate as you would like in order to feel like you get as much as possible from this hour. To start, you'll just see the slide here, just hoping you can add your name, the program you work for, or maybe the school you're attending, and your email address. And like it says, if you'd like it to be private, you see an option there for you. That's just so I can make sure to get you the link for the CEU quiz if that's something that you need to do after the event to get the 1 CEU hour. Also, my email address is up there, and our center, the Utah Criminal Justice Center, is ucjc@utah.edu. Either email address will get you to someone on our team if you have any questions or anything that comes up after today's event. So we really hope that this strength series is an ongoing offering that we can provide to highlight practices that are aligning with what research tells us decreases the likelihood that an individual will engage in future criminal behavior. So again, my name is Jessica Seawright, joined here by Chad Shubin, and I'm a research analyst at the Utah Criminal Justice Center, and I've worked. Here's our homepage, our website page, but I've been working at the intersection of between social work and criminal justice for almost 10 years. And what brought me here is I've been completing program evaluations for about 5 years. So I've evaluated adult and juvenile programs across the state and used a tool called the Correctional Program Checklist. I just want to give you a little background so I can sort of frame up Chad so he can come in and really provide the interesting part of this hour. But the CPC was created by researchers at the University of Cincinnati, and it's maintained by UCCI, which is the Corrections Institute that they have hosted there. And the tool is used to identify how closely correctional programs meet known principles of effective intervention. Now, the CPC aligns with the research on risk, need, and responsivity, or R&R. You may have heard that terminology. Don't feel like you have to read this handout that's on the screen. It's just for a visual, but I am happy to send this handout to you or give you more information about this program evaluation tool if you want it after we meet today. The CPC used several studies to validate indicators used, and you can learn more from Dr. Ed Latessa and colleagues' book, What Works and Doesn't in Reducing Recidivism, including why program quality is important. Now, that second edition came out in 2020, and if If you by chance came to our reading group in December and you have the book, it's on page 297 where they're talking about why program quality is important. So kind of reframing why we're here today, one takeaway that our team has had while completing these program evaluations across the state is there are a lot of strengths happening. And really that's the goal of today's event, to share and cultivate what's working in Utah and open up dialogue amongst providers about the ways to balance research with practice. So recidivism. This may have come up in your day-to-day work. The National Institute of Justice defines recidivism here, measured by criminal acts that resulted in rearrest, reconviction, or return to prison with or without a new sentence during a 3-year period following the prisoner's release. Now, as treatment providers, case managers, peer support specialists, wherever you're coming from, today I want to focus on what decreases the likelihood that an individual will engage in future criminal behavior. Now, let's see, criminal justice researchers have sort of asked, what are these factors that are correlated with criminal conduct? And in 1998, Andrews and Bonta identified this set of major risk factors, which have been confirmed by subsequent studies. Now, this is a lot of text on one slide, and I just want to focus this in. I am happy to talk about these if any of these R&R or any of these risk factors feel unfamiliar or you're just getting acquainted with them. Come on to the open consultation hour that is at it is at 4 p.m. Today. So you can join me there and we can keep talking about these risk factors. But for today's purpose, a lot of you may be coming in and you may be community-based substance use treatment clinicians, case managers, or peer support specialists. So you're familiar how this final one, substance abuse, may contribute to a lifestyle that brings individuals into contact with the justice system. And you're also hopefully familiar and really passionate about how clients can change behaviors around substance abuse. You may have also observed how these factors on this slide here interact with each other. It's not as clean cut as this bulleted list suggests. So today we're going to be focusing on how low levels of involvement in pro-social leisure activities, how that fits into things. So maybe if you might add into the chat, if you're up for engaging, what are some of the ways that you hear this during treatment? This leisure activities, recreation activities. Some that come to mind for me that I've heard in group observations are, I don't have any hobbies. Or, you know what, when I'm not in treatment, I'm just gonna work. I'm gonna get 2 or 3 jobs and just keep myself busy that way. Or, the things that I like to do are just too expensive. So I can't do the leisure activities that I want to do. So let's see. Any that come to mind for you all? Chad will dig in there as well to talk about this. When individuals have low involvement in pro-social leisure activities, they also have a great deal of unstructured time. And so this allows for interaction between antisocial peers and idle time. You can see that second bullet says pro-criminal associates in isolation. The goal in targeting leisure time is not only to remove antisocial behavior, but it's to replace with pro-social behavior. And, it could start with signing up for a softball league or maybe adding some more work hours, but that only scratches the surface to practicing new behaviors around how your client will spend their non-working and non-treatment time as they get more and more success. So further, as I'm wrapping up here, you'll notice that I mentioned learned behaviors and practicing. This is where the third R comes in, responsivity, and that's where it starts to fit in with this R&R model. Specifically, general responsivity that you see on the slide here says that most people respond to programs that are based on structured social learning and cognitive behavioral approaches. So again, we can return to some of this detail. I'm available at the 4 p.m. consultation hour that's in the same Zoom room, or you can always reach out by email. But I want to stop there and give Chad a chance to introduce himself and talk about the leisure skills group that they offer at Wasatch County Family Clinic, where he is program manager. So Thanks, Chad. I'm just going to stop sharing and sort of transition here.
Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everybody. So yeah, I'm the program manager of the Wasatch County Family Clinic. My agency is Wasatch Behavioral Health, and we function out of two mental health area authority areas. So we've got our Utah County and then our Wasatch County. And so that's the area I cover is Wasatch County. I also do mobile crisis outreach for Summit County and Wasatch County as well, and just expanded those services recently. So we are a rural office, pretty small office, just a handful of therapists, 4 therapists, so pretty small agency. And we provide all services from mental health to substance abuse, and our one-stop shop. And so we're kind of jack of all trades, expert at none. And I was the fortunate one to have my review with Jessica, and apparently Jessica thought I did something okay. And so she's asked me to present on what she saw me do. I don't pretend to be an expert at any of this. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and enjoy just general practice, enjoy working with substance abuse as well as mental health. And so hopefully, just this peer environment has some use for you as we share some ideas and yeah, just pass some information along. So to start, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's get this up and running here. Let's see. All right. Let's make sure this goes. I think we should be up and running. Jessica, is that up and going for you?
It looks good to me.
All right. Okay. So intentional living is what I entitled this presentation today. I think many of us as therapists love that word intentional, the idea of making what is implicit to us, what we don't necessarily understand, explicit, and making intentional decisions. And particularly in our leisure, what we're doing when we don't have to be doing something or we have options, what do we intentionally do with that time? So I wanted to use that title. All right, let's make sure this goes forward here. All right, we'll go back here. Oops, I'm cruising through a little faster than I wanted to. So the program curriculum that we use, it's called Leisure Step Up. That is the actual title. Dave Den was the writer of this, and it was published all the way back in 1995. We found it. We offer IOP services and had some group members that had already graduated from a lot of our groups. And we felt like it would be a waste of time to push them through some of the groups they'd already done. And so in the effort to maintain intensive outpatient, and those that aren't familiar with that, it requires a minimum of 9 hours of service a week based on ASAM criteria for substance use. And so we were trying to figure out what we could do, and we started digging through some of our curriculum, and we came across the Leisure Step Up program and felt like it fit perfectly. As you can see, Jessica highlighted the value of engagement and pro-social activities. So we decided to utilize this. You can purchase this. Again, I do have to tell you guys, I do not have an affiliation with Dave Den or this curriculum or with the publisher of this material. It's just simply something that we use. I Googled the name Leisure Step Up, and Dave Den just yesterday came up. It's $50 at the editor. Down at the bottom, you can, excuse me, the publisher. The publisher is Idle Arbor. So if you're interested in this curriculum, you can grab it for pretty cheap. So how much time do I got, Doc? So I love doing this with my clients with that concept of intentional living. I want my clients to really be acutely aware of how finite their life is and what they're making out of their life and what they want to make out of their life as they move forward. So as part of doing that, I'll typically do an example where I ask them about a 90-year lifespan, how many hours you live. And I've got it up here, but you get sometimes people saying in the millions, but it's interesting how ungrounded a lot of us are with how finite life is. I put in about 22 leap years there, 789,000 hours. is all we get from first breath to 90-year birth date. So, or that equates to about 32,872 days. So the big question is what are we going to do with it? So a little history on myself. I think we're all familiar with the concept of neural pathways, the development of neural pathways, the importance of repetition and myelinization. I was looking at the chat box, and it was somebody mentioned that some people may not know even what leisure activities they enjoy, particularly for those that are involved in the justice system, have just gotten out of jail. Those pathways just haven't been utilized. A lot of what we talk about in the leisure program isn't rocket science, but it's really important stuff. So I put up there, repetition promotes top of mind awareness. That's my marketing education coming out from my undergraduate. We want these clients to have a moment where they have free time and they say to themselves, what am I going to do with my free time? What am I going to do to be intentional, to use those few hours that I have to make this a meaningful lifespan? So this curriculum is fantastic in helping to facilitate that and repetitively working that throughout the course of the program. And just as an FYI, if anybody's current how old I am, I'm 15,714 days old today. So congratulations to me, I guess, today. It is not my birthday today. George Eastman said, and if you're familiar with George Eastman, he was the founder of Eastman Kodak. What we do during our working hours determines what we have. What we do in our leisure hours determines what we are. And I believe that's really true. When we don't have to be doing something and we get to choose what we do, what do we choose? And that really begins to define who we are as people. So not many slides. We have about this slide and one more slide. So we're going to do a lot of talking on each of these. This is the leisure level model. So Den took this from Nash and adapted it himself. The great thing about this is we are all familiar with the concept of neural pruning, I think. So as we're children, we grow up and we start to develop these neural pathways, and everything in the world is this kind of captured into our brain. And as we get older, our brain starts to prune away those neural pathways and uses the ones that are used the most, and the ones that are not used very frequently kind of get cut out and aren't utilized. And this leisure level model helps in the sense that it provides us with a generalization. I remember being taught once that you typically don't remember what people did to you all the time. You typically don't remember what people said to you, but you remember how they made you feel. That's kind of how our memories work, is through those generalizations, being able to create paradigms that simplify the world for us so that we can categorize and make the world an easier place. And the leisure level model takes our leisure time usage and breaks it down into some categories where you can kind of figure out where we sit on this spectrum of leisure. So I know that it's vertical. If you like to think in terms of an up and down spectrum, that's great. If you want to think of left and right, you can see that spectrum as well. But please think about this as a spectrum or a continuum of leisure time usage. Starting at the bottom, we identify leisure as something that produces loss of freedom. Meaning, if I do it, do I become incarcerated? By doing it, do I get somebody else incarcerated? Do I infringe upon somebody else's freedoms by engaging in the leisure activity that I'm engaging in? So that's the ground, that's the base floor of leisure utilization, according to Den. Then we've got level -2, in which we're harming somebody in some way. Whether, it's a big brother that just wants to hit his younger brother, to bullying behaviors at school, or in public. Am I hurting somebody else? Level -1, obviously harm to self. And then we get into our neutral zone, level 0. So in level 0 is we're going to be engaged in the activity, but we're not actually present. We've got other things on our mind. We aren't being mindful of what's going on. I'm thinking about, for instance, a divorce, or I am thinking about work stressors. It's the inability to separate and actually be engaged in that leisure activity. You see that a lot, as a therapist. I've spent years working with adults and kids, and in my practice and working with children, it's been fun to work with parents, particularly on the same concept, and helping clients to be aware of not only what they're doing, but their internal experiencing, right? You get those clients where you teach them a skill, you teach them perhaps to, just for an example's sake, talk kindly to a child, to talk with a softer voice. And you get the parent who says, okay, Billy, I need you to XYZ. And you get the calmness, but internally that parent is not present, not loving Billy, not really experiencing Billy in the way that the skill is intended to help them do. They're going through the motions, and helping clients to see that we need to do more than just go through the motions to get the maximum impact. We really need to be present in the leisure activity to benefit from it. Level 1 is that passive spectating. So again, this one, you're present, you have nothing to do, and so you want your mind to be engaged in something. I'm pretty confident enough of us are going to go home tonight at the end of the day and sit down with maybe some food or dinner, and turn on the television, and just by virtue of having the TV on, it just does something for us. But we're not really engaged in what's going on TV so much, other than it just provides some background noise. And that's the nature of passive spectating. You're present to extent, you're watching, but you're not fully and emotionally engaged in the process. You do notice what's going on the storyline, but again, no emotional engagement. Then we move to level 2, right? And in which case, we're watching Everybody's Loves Ray, and we're feeling our blood pressure goes up as Ray is about to do something absolutely stupid that is going to upset his wife. And we just feel it coming, and we're emotionally engaged in that moment. We're living the moment with Ray. That would be engaged spectating. Other things, locally, I understand that something between University of Utah and BYU, there's some sort of emotion there, I've heard. That is engaged spectating, right? When we feel that emotion. Now, of course, we want to work with clients because we understand that during football season and other sporting events, domestic violence can tend to go up. When we have clients that get a little too emotionally engaged in those activities and things don't work out the way they want, we may need to help them understand the healthy separation between those two, where a level 2 turns into a level -2 or lost freedom. We move on then to level 3, active engagement. So active engagements can be something where we are physically engaged, or just socially engaged, where cognitively our mind is doing something actively to facilitate the outcome of whatever the leisure activity is, or to facilitate that activity in and of itself. There's actual active engagement. Level 4, according to Den, takes it to the next step, and that's where we move into the step of creation. This can be in the form of building something, working on a car, and bringing it back from the dead, creating art, painting, photography, clay, anything where you can create beauty, to landscaping. I personally even just enjoy, mowing my lawn and weeding. And then, how many of us stop at the end of a day after working in our yard and just enjoy looking at what we've done, that creation? So a lot of opportunities for creation. And then finally, we get to the level of catharsis. So I think we're all familiar with catharsis, but it's the case where, right, we get to allow those emotions go. We get to have a sense of peace. This can be things like praying, even some of the active engagements. For instance, we can take hiking or climbing to a level of catharsis, and where it becomes a very meditative opportunity for us, surfing, swimming, all those things. So you're not limited. You may be doing something that may be seen as an engaged spectating activity to one, while to the other, the individual is experiencing complete catharsis in that. So you might want to help your clients understand that when they engage in those. So that's the leisure level model. It gives our clientele that categorization. Where do I sit on the spectrum? What type of leisure activities do I engage in? And then intentionally they can sit and look at that. I had a client come back one day, and we were doing the check-in and asking him, so what have you gotten from this group? He said, the other day I was just sitting down and just sitting in front of the TV just because I had nothing better to do, and started realizing, I was at a level 1. I needed to start, I need to think about something I could do that took it up a step. Now, mind you, there's nothing wrong with being at level 1. I mean, sometimes we just have to be brainless. But in that particular instance, he seemed to think he had a little bit more energy than that and needed to be mindful and identify another activity that would be more meaningful. So this program, it's a 10-step program that Den offers us. And I essentially took it and put it into the 4 things that Den does throughout the 10 steps. Some of them are repetitive in the sense that you're doing some experiencing at different levels of recreation or leisure. So his step-by-step process simply includes assessment, informing the patient or the client, and helping them to understand leisure, helping them to plan, and then helping them to experience some things. And I'll give you an example. A basic example. I think all of you are familiar with the ideas of modeling, skill training. And I didn't use the term graduated practices. That was Jessica's idea. And then she helped me understand what it is. And I said, oh yeah, I do that. So thank you, Jessica, for helping me with that word. But we'll talk about that in a second. So assessing, the assessment is created by Den. It goes through with the client. You actually have a worksheet that he'll do with you if you do this, looking at the client's leisure functioning, physical functioning, or cognitive functioning, social functioning, and just kind of gives you a basic idea. And then he suggests the idea that you want to do a general assessment with the client like we do as therapists. So there's that piece. And then as we move forward from that basic assessment stuff that we all do with all of our treatment. Den moves into looking at leisure of the past. And the leisure of the past is really interesting as they become familiar with the categorized model with the spectrum. We have them identify what activities have they engaged in the past? What was their utilization of leisure? And at this point, the client, it provides a little bit of a motivational interviewing flair to it, as well as that CBT insight. As they start to categorize, what did I used to do? I used to hang out with my friends and smoke weed. Well, where's that? On the leisure level model. Or, we used to go out and, I don't know, pickpocket people. Or, we used to go vandalize. And as they start looking at some of the things that they've done in the past and categorizing that, it's a real awakening for them. The questions that are asked are to identify the specific activity. What level did that activity fall on? When did you start doing the activity, and when did you stop doing the activity? Who got you involved in the activity? And what was going on in your life when you started engaging in that activity? So a lot of insight comes out of that. And then we move into assessing their past feelings. So now they've had the chance to go through this cognitive behavioral therapy practice of writing everything down, categorizing it. And then we get to step back and say, so how do you feel about that? And that's a pretty, it's a pretty tough moment for some folks. You may have to be prepared to do some encouraging, help them understand that who they were in the past doesn't necessarily need to color who they are now. But it's helpful, right? Because unless a problem is a problem, And excuse me for stating the obvious. Unless you know a problem is a problem, you can't solve the problem. We all have these neural pathways that have been myelinated and processed and utilized repetitively. Um, and I'll talk to my clients about that. All these things that they used to do are habits. And so when they have a certain trigger that triggers a certain neural cluster, they're going to immediately want to go straight down that neural pathway and do the behaviors that they've done in the past. And so we're working on through this process of developing that insight into what are my tendencies? What are those neural pathways that are easiest for me to use that I'm going to need to work hard to avoid? And we all know how hard it is to break habits. But again, we're developing that awareness that these are the things that they want to avoid and helping them to pair that motivational piece of the emotion that it produces, that it didn't make me feel good. And then we'll move on throughout treatment and help them to identify new leisure activities that can replace those, and we can develop some new neural pathways. So, all right. Another piece that we will assess, obviously, is we're going to assess for barriers. We need to make clients aware of their own barriers so that they can watch out for them, but also feasibly preclude barriers, as well as identify ways to break out of those barriers or break around those barriers. As we move into the inform element, which is it's throughout, obviously teaching them about the leisure level model and making that very top of mind for them is going to be paramount in this process. And then developing insight into that leisure participation level. So what has my leisure participation been? Have I been a loss of freedom? Am I a -2, a -1, a 0, a 1? What has been my tendency in my leisure participation level? And where do I want to be? We help them identify their leisure attitude awareness. So with this, it's questions like, and this is a really fun one to ask. And this is a quote out of the curriculum. The question is, what is most important at a party or social engagement? And then we'll have the client process that. And then you can stop and say, okay, so, getting drunk or engaging with friends, where do those fall on the leisure level? And you'll obviously have somebody who's going to be flippant and silly, or, throw out the non-pro-social response. And that's not a problem, right? We get to use the mental kung fu and say, where do you feel like that falls on the leisure level model? And that just provides that amazing categorization that simplifies when people give those types of responses, how we can respond to those. So other questions that they ask, when I have time alone, I feel, and then they fill in the blank. My free time at home is fill in the blank, or I believe what I do during my free time affects my self-esteem because. So some good, insightful questions. And then, of course, there's the 24-hour question. And the 24-hour question is, thanks. So the 24-hour question obviously is going to be having them fill out a worksheet on what they do over 24-hour time span and developing that top of mind awareness, or that awareness of how they utilize their time. Planning. So I think all of us, for those of us that are alive, have thought about doing a lot of things, but failed to plan. And there's the age-old saying, when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And the leisure, this curriculum particularly points that out. It indicates spontaneity is just fine. It's okay to be spontaneous. But the problem is when you are constantly spontaneous and you fail to plan, you're going to miss a lot of opportunity. When Jessica was watching me and thought that I did something good, we had the opportunity to do this. We were discussing planning leisure activities, and the leisure planning takes you through something I'd like to do, talking about what's necessary to get there, what might be barriers. In the particular case, we had an individual who was getting a little on the grandiose side, wanted to do a trip to Europe and wanted to do it with an ex romantic partner and a child that they had together. And we got to process. So let's talk about how that works. Let's talk about who finances it. Let's talk about how emotions are going to go. And as we did that, and I had no problem with him going to Europe, but he started to realize that there was some grandiose ideas that, one, financially may not be possible, and I think emotionally may have been problematic as well. And so he decided to shorten it to a shorter trip that would cost a little bit of money, but a little bit more feasible stateside. So we get to do that. We get to talk to them about the process of planning. I'm sure I wish I was talking in front of a group of people live. Doing it over the internet's so hard. I'd have you all raise your hand and ask who has ever purchased a vehicle before. I'm pretty sure 99% of everybody's raising their hand. And then the question is, when did you experience the greatest emotion? And there's been some research suggesting that actually it is the process of purchasing the car, going out, identifying the car, and perhaps I shouldn't quote research without being able to cite the source. If you need me to cite the source, I will dig it up and I can email you it. But the idea is that when we go to purchase a car, it's the process of looking for the car that is actually the most fun, creates the most heightened emotion for us. And it's relatively anticlimactic after we purchase the car. There's some fun, and then that climax quickly drops off, just like anything, getting anything new. It's the process of acquisition and helping the clients to enjoy the process of planning and having something to look forward to with a partner or spouse, and talking about the things that they're going to do, and saving the money and working for it, and having these fun projections of what they get to do together and enjoying that process. So that's discussed here. And we try to help the clients embrace that it's not this idea of living from vacation to vacation, but that we can finish a vacation and say, great, we don't have the money this year, but what can we start working on saving for 2 and or 3 years from now? What are short-term things we can do that we can look forward to and start planning for? And we can enjoy that planning process just as much, if not more, than the actual experiences. Although I don't know that there's any research that suggested that the planning is better than the vacations. So that is not what I'm saying here. That was just a car purchasing example. So again, spontaneity, okay, but helping them to understand the planning and enjoying that planning process. Then finally, we move to the experience element. And in the experience element, we're going to push them through multiple different experiences. They're going to have to, as part of the homework, do certain things. We have them do an expressive leisure, where they're going to do some sort of an art or a craft, music, drama, dance, do something around your house, decorate, and then come back. And the reporting on that is they're going to report back on what they did. They're going to report back on their thoughts of the activity, the feelings the activity brought out, and whether or not they plan on doing that again. So the curriculum actually begins to push these people into experimentation where perhaps they have lost sight of what they enjoy doing. So that expressive element, the expressive leisure, we have them do physical leisure in the form of games, sports, physical activity, yoga, anything health related, exercise. We have them do cultural leisure, which could be engaging in something that's educational, something that is religious, something where it engages in, for instance, collecting hats, coins, cars, volunteering, or doing something social, going to a bar mitzvah or any family activity, a 4th of July event. So that's the level of things that we go through and then ask them all those questions. Throughout the entire throughout the entire thing, I think that we're all very familiar with the concepts of modeling, training to the skill. And these concepts are, for instance, when we did the planning. I can't remember exactly what I spoke of, but I was able to talk about how my wife and I were able to plan something. And then we're able to utilize that modeling to break down the skill and then graduate the practice wherein the client actually says, realistically, this is something that I'd like to plan in my life. And so that's that idea of graduated practice that Jessica identified. I was utilizing without having given it a name. It's that real life application is what I would have called it. And one thing I just want to really help everybody understand, and this is hard for me, be pro-social, please, in your groups. I think we all know that. I've seen a lot of groups. Some are really good at running groups, and some of us are not. And by pro-social, I'm just saying, learn to love the people you're with, be human with them, connect with them, and just be real with them. And these groups will just have so much utilization and so much utility for these folks when you can do that. So that's the end of my messaging for today. Here's my name. There's a phone number if you want to contact me with questions on this, and my email. You can contact me. Hopefully nobody emails me and tries to find that research on cars, because that'll take me a bit, but I'm sure I could find it. But we'll open it up to questions now.
Yeah, I just shared a little bit on the chat that, the group that I observed was a virtual group, which has been something unique to this year, but may continue. I mean, telehealth. And so translating these groups across, maybe if it's okay to say, modalities, and how you utilized your screen and you were comfortable enough with the technology to be able to utilize the screen, just Word doc, and have that concrete way to work through during the group these activities was very, very nice to see.
And honestly, that's a self-care strategy that I use in most of my therapy. Some of you guys might think I'm a horrible therapist for doing this, but I use my screen as a whiteboard and utilize a bigger font when my clients are both in office, as well as virtually. And then that becomes my notes. I like doing that because it also helps me to highlight the specific points that I'm trying to identify with the client, so I can continue to point at that particular idea. Oftentimes, my earlier years, I walked away from a session saying, did that client really know what I was trying to emphasize? So it has multiple utilizations for me. It gets my notes done quicker, helps me emphasize points as well. So yeah.
It also really connected for me. We have Dr. Salisbury here, director of UCJC, and just we had a past event on assessment-driven case planning, and really sharing these documents with the client, having that shared visual. Just to reiterate what Chad was saying, just sharing that information in a really upfront way so you can work through it together. So I really liked that.
Thanks, Jessica.
Hi, my name is Christian Sarver. I also work with Jessica. I've done a lot of CPCs, but Chad, this is the first time I've ever seen someone actually plan how you target leisure problems and leisure activities, and it's awesome. I'm so excited to see you think of it as a skill, think of it as something that's harder than just, especially I think now in the pandemic. I mean, my leisure is like getting off the couch and walking to the refrigerator. So it's
well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to start having other programs around the state use this, because I think it's such important. And I think not just having folks go through the same groups again and again, right? Because that obviously there's a point where you're only going to learn so much from moral recognition therapy if you take it 5 times. So I think this is great.
Thanks. And I do want to emphasize this is a tool that can be utilized both from case management, peer supports, as well as therapists. It just, the depth is going to differ depending upon who's facilitating it. So for anybody who would be interested in using the curriculum, there's some creative solutions to who can man a group like this as well. Any other questions? And don't forget, there's going to be a test. So You want to stick around for the questions. See, it might be a test question. We're not sure. Jessica's got her cheat sheet there, it looks like.
Yeah, I've got some questions if folks, if needed, if we need a jump off point. I see Joseph's chat. The resources, I'm recording the session here, so we'll make sure to get this on the UCJC YouTube. And also I'll work with Chad to make sure that, you know the curriculum name, you can access some of the stuff that was shared today.
Yeah, and the assessment I referred to, everything I referred to, Joseph, is in the curriculum. So that $50 curriculum includes that assessment. Man, I wish I was connected to Den. I could get a royalty, I don't know, but unfortunately I don't know him. So
maybe Chad, can you tell us a little bit, how does this differ when you're working with mandated clients? How do you promote engagement? Is it your energy level? If you're a new clinician, if I were a new clinician, do you have any tips, how to bring folks into the group?
Yeah, with the mandated clients, we all see that, depending upon most recent criminal activity or most recent substance use, as they're moving through those levels of change, that's going to modify. And there's that, that's kind of it's a big question, right? Because it depends upon the group dynamics. If you have somebody who's further along in the stages of change, we get to utilize that positive group peer element as a model to help the individual who's further along. Whereas if we have a group of brand new people, right, then we get to kind of go that motivational interviewing route where we're working on helping them to develop that desire and insight to want to begin to change. So it really depends upon what the group dynamic brings on how we're going to approach it.
All right, there's a question in the chat about maybe for case management and peer support, maybe sharing a simple example of how different facilitators might use the curriculum.
Yeah, so I mean, I can hold the curriculum up so you guys can see it. It comes in a printed 3-ring binder form. It's nothing really amazing to behold, but each section essentially has a little prologue to each of the sections, and a case manager can go through and highlight specific points. They don't get to process the points, right, the way that a therapist is licensed to process and look at emotion and discuss impacts of trauma and other experiences, but they can still highlight the points. So the depth of the group is not going to be the same, but the curriculum essentially gives the entire agenda. And I did say that it's a 10-step program. I don't do it in 10 days. It just depends upon the pace. If we've got a conversation going and haven't gotten to the worksheet, we can stretch it in as much as we feel like that there's a clinical benefit for the client. But in terms of your question, it is the dialogue and information is all set out for any licensing level to utilize. I hope that's helpful, the way that I explain that.
Yeah, feel free to jump on chat or written chat or using your audio if you'd like. Feel free to interrupt me is what I'm saying. But earlier when we were getting going, someone also kind of emphasized a point that I was talking about of overworking. You have a client that is really motivated to move through treatment. And we see this a lot when we're observing, and they're just filling their schedule with a couple of jobs. They have fees and whatnot. So how do you bring some awareness of balance and the importance of bringing leisure activities?
Absolutely. So when I speak of balance, I speak to the clients in terms of I often use a skiing analogy. We're doing leisure, right? So skiing and or surfing. The idea of balance being that one, to do anything, you need to understand the basics. To ski, you need to understand that your shoulders stay above your hips. You don't turn with your shoulders. Any Olympic skier understands those basics. But then we have to start to understand also that energy level plays a role in balance as well. And I'll show them an image of a skier, a super G skier, who's almost parallel to the snow. And the question is how long can that skier ski just like that? And these Olympic level skiers, they're skiing for maybe 2 to 3 minutes, and I think they're completely spent. And we discussed that spectrum of being completely parallel to the snow on one side or the other, of that sometimes, yeah, I've been at work until 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. because if I didn't get a project done, it was going to create problems. But I don't do that frequently. And sometimes I have a mental health day and I have to wake up and I say, you know what? And this doesn't happen often, but we all do it. 1 or 2 days a year, we just go, I've got to stay home. I just need to connect with my family or connect with life. And so I completely lean the other way. And most of the time we're somewhere in between that, and just kind of working that balance like we do a steering wheel, and helping them to identify that key element, one of the need for rest. Rest is paramount. Your energy level, your endurance is paramount in balancing life. And leisure plays a big role. I'll cite, again, I can look for this if I had to, but I like to cite Industrial Revolution research. In my business education, we looked at coal shovelers, and they did some research at one point where they had some guys shoveling coal, two samples, and they had one group shovel all day long, take a lunch break, and then continue shoveling. They had another group taking intermittent breaks and a lunch break. And of course, as we probably all know, the team that was taking the intermittent breaks was actually producing more than those that required to continue to shovel. And I like to use that as an example for my clients in terms of understanding that sometimes overworking ourselves does not produce more. And we have to be careful with what we also identify as produce. If all we're considering is money, we might be a little blind to other things that we need to be working on in life as well.
I like how that connects with the, reminding and bringing to the forefront the number of days, like you discussed when you started your presentation. How many days do you have and what do you value, and starting to change, or not change, but agitate values a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Christian asked in the chat, just if anyone has ways that they address leisure activities, recreation with justice involved clients, please feel free to share. Another thing I've heard is just that with this curricula or this focus, that you might consider when you pace this, is this right before they finish treatment and it's a group that they come into near the end, a later phase or a later part of treatment. And also, if you just think of the slide that I showed with the risk factors, how does targeting leisure then cross peer associations? How does it cross all of another target that you may be focusing on? So someone is assessed with multiple risks or criminogenic needs that you want to target while they're in treatment, and how do they cross over? And finally, how can you think about how your whole team is looking at this? So Chad's talking about a group, but then he also mentioned, you check in during an individual session. And another person in the chat mentioned a peer support specialist or a case management can reinforce this. And that really gets into that social learning of building these new pathways, hearing the same things over and over, because it does matter. And I think sometimes, just like when we start a new job or when we're training someone on a new job, it seems easy to you. And I think as therapists, clinicians in this profession, it's hard to stay in touch with how the simple stuff matters so much and how your team can reinforce these concepts. It was a lot of word jumble.
It all made sense, Jessica. It was well stated.
Thanks for that positive reinforcement. We'll just have our Zoom group here. All right. Well, hey, let me just offer some wrap up. And again, please feel free to add in if you have any last minute questions that bubble up to the surface. So grateful for you all being here during this first Justice Provider Strength series. If you felt motivated and you thought, you know what, I want to present something that I feel really strong as a provider in bringing to the table, get in touch with me, jessica.seawright@utah.edu. Let's talk about ways that we can work together on more future events in this series. Questions can come to me. I'm going to go ahead and throw the link to the CEU quiz if you need that hour CEU. I'm going to just try to multitask here and throw that in the chat. So you can click on that link directly, or you can put your email address name in the chat, either privately or to the group, whatever your comfort level is, and just make sure that I'm leaving with your contact information so that I can follow up with chat with the name of the curriculum, with resources that are coming out of this event. I'll also be able to share the link to the YouTube video if you want to share it with team members or folks that couldn't be here today. So that's a lot to say. Don't leave without telling me who you are and that you were here so that I can make sure to get you, post-event resources. Thank you, Chad, for bringing this to this first series, and really I appreciate your time and energy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Last thoughts. Some thank yous coming in for you, Chad, in the chat. All right, grateful for all of your time. Take care. I'm going to end the event. Wishing you all a great day.
Thank you.